My girlfriend cheated while I paid all the rent and utilities, so I left silently, and what happened after left her crying and alone. I'm a 27-year-old guy who genuinely believed that love meant showing up, no matter the cost. When I met Emily, she was in one of the roughest patches of her life. Barely any savings, drowning in bills, and constantly stressed about how she'd make rent each month. I thought, this is what love looks like. You help, you support, you sacrifice. So I did. I covered rent, utilities, groceries, even small luxuries she treated herself to once in a while, telling myself it was temporary. It's okay, I'd say, carrying bags of groceries up 3 flights of stairs. I want you to focus on your career and your health. Friends and family noticed. You're so selfless, my mom told me once over the phone, her voice warm. Emily is lucky to have you. My friends nodded, praising my reliability, and I felt proud, secure, even a little heroic in my own quiet way. Every payment I made, every late shift I picked up to cover the shortfalls, felt like I was building a life for both of us. Emily herself would smile and squeeze my hand. You're my rock, she'd say, and I'd smile back, believing that these were the foundations of something real. Nights spent cooking dinner together, mornings laughing over coffee, even the small arguments about silly things, they all felt part of this grand, messy, beautiful partnership. But underneath all that, I ignored the small pangs in my chest, the text she'd quickly swipe away when I walked into the room, the little excuses about why she couldn't contribute more financially. I told myself it was stress, it was timing, it was nothing. I had no idea that this sense of loyalty, this pride I felt in carrying her burdens, was quietly setting me up for the most humiliating betrayal of my life. I was blind, trusting, convinced that my love and sacrifice were enough, until one ordinary evening started unraveling everything I thought I knew. At first, I thought the tension I started feeling was just stress from work. Emily seemed more distant lately, laughing at her phone when I walked into the room, avoiding plans with my friends, skipping visits to my family. I'd ask, hey, you coming to dinner tomorrow? And she'd shrug, I've got a lot on my plate, babe. And I'd nod, convincing myself it was fine. I kept thinking, I'm supporting her. She's stressed. This is temporary. But little things started stacking up. I noticed money missing from our joint account, small amounts at first, things I could overlook, but then larger sums. I asked her casually, hey, did you withdraw some cash yesterday? And she'd smile nervously, brushing it off. Oh, just bills, nothing big. I wanted to believe her so badly that my gut instinct became background noise. Even friends started noticing. Dude, she barely chips in. One of them mentioned over lunch. I laughed it off, embarrassed. Yeah, well, she's going through a rough patch. I felt proud, carrying the financial load like some noble knight, telling myself this was what love meant. But inside, I started feeling exhausted. I was picking up extra shifts at work, counting every cent, making sure rent was paid, groceries were stocked, the utilities covered, while Emily seemed untouchable, floating through life with minimal effort. The imbalance stung, but I rationalized it as devotion, love, and patience. I didn't realize how much I was sacrificing until one quiet evening, sitting alone on the couch while Emily laughed at some joke on her phone, that a small, nagging suspicion began to grow inside me. A seed of doubt I had been trying to ignore. Something isn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that what I was about to discover would change everything. It started with the late nights. Emily would claim she was working late or catching up on emails, but I noticed a pattern. Week after week, she was never where she said she'd be. One night, I came home from a double shift and the apartment was dark, quiet, except for the faint glow of her phone screen on the counter. She jumped slightly when I walked in. Hey, I was just finishing some stuff, she said, voice too casual, too rehearsed. I nodded, but my gut churned, that uncomfortable nod I'd been ignoring tightening. I began noticing other things, her laughter when texting someone I didn't recognize, whispered phone calls she would quickly hang up as I entered the room, little flinches when I approached. I wanted to confront her, to ask the questions I feared the answers to, but I froze, hoping it was nothing. The exhaustion of covering every expense, of holding everything together while she seemed untouchable, was crushing me, and I still clung to my idea of love. Conversations started to feel hollow. Babe, Can we split this dinner bill next time? I'd suggest, testing the waters. I'm fine. Don't worry about it, she'd reply, smiling, but I could sense the subtle defensiveness beneath it. I was slowly realizing that my generosity wasn't being appreciated, it was expected. Even the apartment felt heavier now, the air thick with unspoken truths. I would wake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being ridiculous, paranoid, or if something was actually wrong. And then came the first undeniable moment that hit me in the gut, when a notification popped up, a text from someone unfamiliar, and my stomach dropped in a way no late-night work excuse could explain. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't look away. This isn't just suspicion anymore. The truth was creeping closer, and I had a sinking feeling that my life, the life I thought I was building with Emily, was about to unravel completely. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, dragging myself up the stairs after a 12-hour shift, my body aching from exhaustion. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint sound of laughter coming from the living room. I froze at the doorway, my heart pounding, and then I saw it. Emily, leaning against the counter, her head thrown back laughing at something on her phone, a man's voice echoing faintly through the speaker. My chest tightened, cold dread settling over me. I tried to reason it away, clinging to hope. Maybe it's just a friend, maybe it's work. I stepped closer. Then her phone buzzed, and I caught a glimpse of the messages. Flirtatious, intimate, unmistakably not friendly. My throat went dry. I whispered, almost to myself, "Emily, what the hell is this?" She turned to me, panic flashing in her eyes, then quickly masked it with a nervous laugh. "It's nothing, I swear," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I felt my world collapsing. Every late night, every work excuse, every dollar I'd spent thinking I was helping her build a future, all of it felt like it had been a lie. My hands shook as I realized I had been supporting someone who was actively betraying me. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to rip every lie from her mouth. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stepped back, my mind racing, trying to process the betrayal. The anger mixed with disbelief, a toxic cocktail that made it hard to breathe. My apartment, once a safe space filled with shared laughter and quiet dinners, now felt like a trap, every familiar object a reminder of how blind I had been. I wanted to confront her, to make her admit it, but a small, terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if this was just the tip of the iceberg? What if everything I believed about us, about our life, was false? And in that heavy silence, with her trying and failing to explain, I realized one undeniable truth. I couldn't trust her anymore. The days that followed were unbearable. Emily acted as if nothing had happened, smiling at me over breakfast, asking about my work, laughing at jokes she knew I'd find funny, but I couldn't see past the betrayal anymore. Every time I tried to bring it up, she deflected. "You're overthinking this, I swear," or gaslit me with, "I can't believe you don't trust me after everything I do for you." Her words felt like knives, twisting my pride and anger into a knot I couldn't untangle. I started losing sleep, lying awake in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the city outside, replaying that moment over and over. My mind kept asking the same questions. How long has this been going on? How could I have been so blind? How did love turn into this nightmare? Even when I was at work, focused on spreadsheets and meetings, her laughter and the messages from that night haunted me, creeping into my thoughts like an uninvited ghost. I noticed the imbalance more than ever, the financial burden I had been shouldering, the emotional energy I poured into her, the sacrifices I made while she coasted through our life with barely a thought. The apartment, once a shared sanctuary, now felt like a stage where her deceit played out silently, and I was both the audience and the fool. I confided in a close friend, my voice shaking, admitting everything. The bills I paid, the late nights, the messages I saw. He shook his head slowly. "Dude, she's using you. Straight up. You're being played." I wanted to argue, to deny it, to cling to the hope that I was mistaken, but deep down I knew he was right. Every day felt heavier, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest like the humid summer air in our apartment. And I realized that I was standing at the edge of something. I could either continue being used, or I could make a choice that would change everything. But at that moment, I still didn't know how far I was willing to go. It all came to a head one night when I walked in unexpectedly after a brutal double shift. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume mixed with something unfamiliar. Alcohol, maybe his cologne. My stomach dropped before I even saw them. There she was, laughing with him on the couch, the casual intimacy between them ripping my chest open. My hands shook, my knees threatened to buckle, and every dollar, every sacrifice, every ounce of loyalty I'd poured into this relationship suddenly felt like it had been a setup for humiliation. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Emily stammered, trying to mask panic with a nervous laugh. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring, every muscle screaming in betrayal and disbelief. The man froze too, awkwardly glancing between us, realizing he was witnessing the fallout of someone else's pain. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel even a fraction of the heartbreak she'd caused me. But instead, I did the only thing that felt remotely powerful. I walked out silently. No words, no confrontation, just the sound of my own footsteps echoing down the hallway as they scrambled in panic behind me. That night, lying on a friend's couch, I felt completely hollow. Every trust one had placed, every act of love and sacrifice, felt like it had been weaponized against me. I questioned my judgment, my sense of reality, even my ability to love again without being used. It was the lowest point I had ever hit, utter shock, shame, and grief colliding in a way that left me almost paralyzed. But even in that devastation, a tiny spark began to form. I refused to let this define me. I wouldn't cry publicly or beg for answers. I would survive this. And as I sat there, staring at the ceiling, I realized that my next steps would decide whether I remained a victim or finally reclaimed control. After that night, I didn't reach out. I blocked her number, removed her from every social media platform, and moved my money into accounts she couldn't touch. For the first time in months, I felt a strange, quiet relief. The kind that comes when you finally stop letting someone control your life. Friends became my anchor, listening without judgment, offering tough love I hadn't realized I needed. "You did everything right, man," one of them said. She just wasn't worth it. I took time for myself. I went on walks late at night, letting the city's hum fill the emptiness she had left behind. The smell of the street vendors' food, the distant honk of cars, even the crisp chill of the night air. It reminded me I was alive, that life still had color beyond betrayal. I started journaling, pouring every ounce of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief onto paper. It was the first time I'd acknowledged how deeply this had cut me, instead of brushing it aside like it didn't matter. With each day that passed, I realized the power had shifted. For months, she had controlled the narrative, her lies, her manipulation, her charm. But now, in my silence, I was taking it back. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make a scene. Quietly, methodically, I was reclaiming my life, step by step. But even as the sense of control returned, a nagging thought lingered. What if she tries to ruin me anyway? What if the chaos I left behind comes back to haunt me? The weight of the unknown pressed down, a reminder that I wasn't fully free yet. And somewhere deep down, I knew that the next move I made would not just be about survival. It would be the beginning of something bigger, something that would finally give me the closure I needed. Weeks later, the twist hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I started hearing whispers from mutual friends. Emily had been bragging, boasting about how easy it was to manipulate me. My stomach turned, rage and disbelief colliding. She wasn't just cheating behind my back. She was spinning the story publicly, painting herself as the victim while making me look controlling, obsessed, even paranoid. Every lie she'd told me now had a public echo, and suddenly the betrayal cut deeper. I remember sitting on my new couch, the hum of the air conditioner filling the room, staring at my phone, feeling sick and strangely vindicated at the same time. "She's telling everyone I'm obsessive?" I muttered, shaking my head. I realized that my silence had given her the upper hand for too long. I couldn't confront her openly without feeding into her narrative, but I didn't need to. This revelation changed everything. What had once been an emotional wound now became a strategy. I had to be smarter, quieter, more deliberate. Every financial adjustment I'd made, every account she couldn't access, every small shift in my routine suddenly felt like preparation for something bigger. My pride wasn't broken, it was sharpening, like a blade I was learning to wield carefully. For the first time, I saw the scope of her deception in full. It wasn't just personal anymore. It had become social, psychological. She had tried to control both my heart and my reputation, and now she would see what happens when someone refuses to be a pawn in someone else's game. I sat there late into the night, thinking, planning, feeling the shift inside me. One thing was clear: this was no longer about heartbreak or loss. This was about reclaiming everything she had tried to take from me, and watching her crumble without me ever needing to raise my voice. And just like that, the quiet revenge I hadn't realized I was capable of started taking shape. I started taking control piece by piece. I documented every dollar I'd spent, every late-night text, every suspicious message she'd sent, proof of everything she'd hidden. I quietly notified the landlord and utility companies to ensure she could no longer claim any shared benefits. Each small action, invisible to her, felt like reclaiming a piece of the dignity she'd tried to steal. I upgraded my accounts, changed passwords, moved out of our shared apartment, and for the first time in months, breathed without that constant weight pressing on my chest. Walking through my new apartment, I noticed how different it felt. Lighter, freer, untouched by the betrayal that had defined the last year. The smell of fresh paint and new furniture reminded me that I was starting over on my own terms. Even mundane things, like doing the dishes or making coffee alone, felt like tiny victories. It was quiet, methodical, and deliberate, a stark contrast to the chaos Emily had left behind. Friends continued to support me, reinforcing the reality I had been too blind to see. "You're doing the right thing," one said, shaking his head. "She doesn't get to touch your life anymore." Their words echoed in my mind, solidifying my resolve. I realized that the power shift wasn't about revenge in the dramatic sense. It was about reclaiming control quietly, ensuring she couldn't manipulate me or anyone else again. Each day, I felt stronger, more confident. I could see her scrambling from a distance, realizing she'd lost her grip without me ever needing to confront her directly. The balance had shifted, and it was exhilarating in a way I hadn't expected. But even as I felt my control returning, a small part of me knew the ultimate moment, the one that would deliver complete closure, was still ahead. And when it came, it wouldn't require words. The moment of silent revenge began without any confrontation. I moved into my new apartment and posted a vague photo online. A glimpse of my fresh start, a sunlit living room, books stacked neatly, coffee steaming in a mug. No captions, no explanations. Within hours, messages started pouring in from mutual friends, asking, "Where's Emily? And are you okay?" The whispers spread naturally, and I watched from a distance as she began to realize that the man she thought she could manipulate had vanished, taking all control with him. Her scramble was subtle at first. Friends mentioned she was suddenly appearing stressed, asking awkward questions about bills, and frantically trying to piece together what I had done. The panic in her voice when calling acquaintances, trying to spin a story, was almost satisfying. Every lie she had told, every manipulation she had attempted, was now unraveling quietly, without me needing to intervene. I took comfort in the normalcy around me. The hum of my new apartment, the scent of fresh coffee brewing, sunlight spilling through the blinds. The chaos that once defined my life was gone. And yet, I could feel the lingering tension, the faint vibration of empowerment coursing through me. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting, just the subtle, quiet realization on her part that she had lost everything she had tried to control. My dignity, my life, my peace, it was all intact, and I hadn't even lifted a finger to yell or accuse. Sitting on my couch that evening, watching the city glow outside my window, I realized something profound. Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't in words or anger. It's in reclaiming your life and letting someone else confront the emptiness they created. And I knew the final act, the one that would truly close this chapter, was still waiting to unfold. Eventually, Emily tried reaching out. Her messages were frantic, entitled, desperate. "Why are you doing this to me? You owe me an explanation. Please, I didn't mean for things to go this far." I didn't reply, not a single word. I realized that silence was more powerful than any argument, that my absence spoke louder than anything I could say. Mutual friends began questioning her version of events. They started seeing the cracks in her stories, the inconsistencies, the half-truths, the way she had tried to paint me as controlling while hiding her own betrayal. Her credibility began crumbling around her, and she had no one left to prop her up. The isolation she had created for herself was absolute. I watched quietly as she struggled, her frantic attempts at spinning the narrative failing. She called friends, showed up at places hoping to get a reaction, but nothing worked. My life had moved on, calm, structured, and completely free of her manipulation. For the first time in months, I felt genuine peace. The anger that had consumed me after discovering her cheating had shifted into clarity and empowerment. I didn't need to confront her, didn't need to explain, didn't need to prove myself. Her actions had exposed her, and my quiet departure had done more damage than any argument ever could. And as I sat back in my new apartment, the hum of the city outside my window filling the space, I finally understood that my silence had been the ultimate confrontation. I didn't need to yell, cry, or fight. I had taken back my life, and she was left to face the consequences of her choices alone. The weight lifted from my shoulders, but I also knew the final closure. The piece that would truly cement this chapter was still just around the corner. Months later, I finally felt the weight lift completely. My life, rebuilt quietly and deliberately, had a rhythm I hadn't known in years. I had my own apartment, my finances were fully secure, and the friends who mattered most were still by my side. The chaos Emily had left behind, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, was nothing more than a memory now, one that no longer controlled me. I reflected on how much I had grown. I learned that loyalty is valuable, but only when it's reciprocated. Love isn't about sacrificing everything for someone who will take it for granted. It's about respect, trust, and shared effort. I realized that leaving silently, refusing to beg or confront in anger, had given me the ultimate victory. My dignity was intact, my life untouched, and she was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. The satisfaction wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no public confrontations, no heated arguments. Instead, it was the quiet, undeniable fact that I had rebuilt my life stronger than before, while she floundered in the chaos she had created. Watching her struggle from afar, knowing that my absence had shaken her more than anything I could have said, was a strange but deeply satisfying closure. And finally, I felt free. Free to trust again, to love without fear, to live without the constant anxiety of manipulation. The betrayal that had once crushed me had transformed into empowerment, a lesson I would carry forward forever. I had left silently, but in that silence, I had spoken louder than words ever could. And in the emptiness she left behind, I found a peace and strength that belonged only to me.